Hello. 1 2 1 2. Check. 1 2. What's up, guys? Welcome to this brand new first one bi-weekly homework. Today we are doing monsters and grayscales, and I'll be giving you some feedback. Now, just realized it by saying that we don't really have a monster in front of us right now, but I thought I could give some great feedback and help the entire community with it, so I accept it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, basically starting last week, every 2 weeks I'll be giving a homework. And if you participate and submit your homework, you'll get the chance for me to pick your work and give you feedback after this on the Wednesday following, which comes to be today. And so today I'll give you some feedback on value scale, lighting, reference, all of that great stuff. If you are with me on YouTube or Instagram, I have my eyes on both chats. I will try to not ignore anybody and answer every and all questions. Where am I? There we go. Trying to make sure I'm seeing you guys on Instagram. Bear with me a minute. Let's move this a tiny bit more. Let's move that a tiny bit more. All right. So I'll be giving you feedback in a minute. If you have any question, go ahead and ask them away. Usually if you put a capital Q, it helps me to see questions from you guys chatting. I want to say hi to Ray Black, the Steampunk Planner that are already on YouTube, and a bunch of you guys on Instagram that comes and goes. Ray, you were asking question, is the Halloween challenge really a challenge or just a glorified raffle? Well, it is a challenge, but then you're adding, and if it's a raffle, does that mean just any old finger painting will be accepted? Well, no. Because it's about pumpkin. So if you do whatever with your fingers, that's up to you. But what we're doing during the pumpkin calendar challenge is to celebrate Halloween and have some fun as a community. And what you get is 3 classes for free from me on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, starting on the 21st, 22nd, and then 23rd, where I'll give you some tips about sketching, coloring, and rendering, basically showing you a step-by-step on how I would approach doing a pumpkin. This is mainly targeted to beginners to intermediate, as I'm going to show you a step-by-step that you'll be able to replicate. If you participate and share your progress, you will get a chance to win 6 of the tablets that Huyan decided to gracefully give us for the participant. Now, it is a challenge, but it's not a challenge based on the quality of the work or the aesthetic of the work. Simply participation gets you a chance to win. Winners will be picked at random. And to answer the question that you're probably trying to see is, yes, there will be a very, very nice deal coming up with this for the people that want it to join the DPA. I'll give you more details when we get there. But today, let's focus on homework. So I want to say a big thank you to everybody that participated and submitted the work in the tribe. I was very impressed with the work that was put. I have work of the DPA students as well as work from the community members. I'll start with the DPA and then try to do as many as I can of anybody else that joined the challenge. How can I get my work critiqued? Shumbit on Instagram. So to be able to have your work critique, you had to submit it yesterday. That doesn't mean that you cannot participate for the next one, which will start on Monday. On Monday, what we'll do is it's called Technicolor. We'll add colors to the work that we did this 2 weeks. And on Wednesday in 2 weeks, I'll go live again to give feedback on your color version of this week homework, if that makes sense. If you want more the details, all the details, I'll be sharing all of this in Discord. So if you're on Instagram, there should be a link in the bio. Sometimes you can also just put the word tribe, T-R-I-B-E, in any comments or DM that you send to the Paintable account to give a link to the tribe itself. And if you're already a member of the tribe, you can go check the channels. We have channels specifically for the homework, all the details on how to participate, how to submit your work, and the actual homework will be fine in there. Hello, this is Rebecca on a different channel. Oh, you guys. Hi, Rebecca. Another name, the Steampunk Planner. Didn't get my Grayscale in on this time, but we'll try to put it on Discord. That sounds good. The tips that I'll be giving you guys will be able to help you, no matter if you submitted your work or not. So I'm going to start here with the work of Escape Artist, DPM member. You'll join next time, submit. That sounds great. So first of all, thank you so much for submitting this. I think it's a great reference. Let me show the reference to people on Instagram. Absolutely beautiful. And the rendering is pretty good. It's missing the total value range. So for everybody on Instagram, I'm going to put this in front, and I'm going to change the reference to grayscale by taking out the saturation. I'll put it a little bit smaller as well, so we can compare it. And you can tell right away that the value scale is larger on the reference, meaning the high values towards the white are much higher, paler, and you have also deeper shadows towards the blacks. So we're going to try to fix that. There's many ways to do it because you already have a good base. So I'm going to show you a trick that I like to do. First of all, I'm going to move this reference on the side. And I will add a level adjustment layer on top of it. And what I'll do is I'll try to just see if I can boost contrast a little bit. This is going to help me because you already have a base, right? So I'm trying to get just a bit more contrast, really. But because I think the contrast was not where it needed to be on your illustration from the get-go, we're still going to have to come back to change a few things. But this is always a good trick if you're doing any black and white, having a level adjustment layer, which I don't know if you have it on Procreate. I know you have it on mainly all the other ones. Procreate might not have it. But you could also do something with a brightness contrast, just playing with the brightness and contrast of it all. I'm going to make a copy of this so we have a reference after that. And whoops. Okay. What did I do here? Let's bring that back here. Yeah, that's good. All right. Let me just attach that to this guy. And merge it. So, before, after. The other thing I'm going to do is, on the reference, the background was darker. So, let's make sure to have a darker background. This is going to help by having contrast where it's needed to read the silhouette. I'll be talking about why it's important to have a like the right background in terms of value when you start painting a little bit later with other example, but it's important. The reason why it's important is because when we're looking at something, our eyes always compare the value and colors based on whatever value and colors is surrounding any given value or colors. basically our eyes compare what we're seeing from what's adjacent to it. So it's always very important. So that's going to be for that. It's going to help a little bit. Now the other thing I want to add here is a little bit more like the shadows need to be moved a little bit, and the highlight needs to be moved a little bit. I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to use, I could use just a normal layer and go with white, but I'm going to see if I can actually use something like an overlay or a color dodge and keep the values that you already have established in transparency, basically. I could also maybe see, let me try just color dodge with, yeah, something like that. And I'm going to do some selective work, maybe. So we have the forehead here. I could use a little bit more highlights. The cheekbone over here could also have a little bit more of a highlight. The nose could use a little highlight. The fingers could use a lot of highlight. The finger is the part of the illustration on the reference photo that is that has the most contrast. So very important to bring that closer to the value that's there, because this is what's going to attract the eye from right away. And once you have that, I'm going to add just a little bit more shadows. Again, I'm going to make a selection here and just kind of add a little bit more shadows there. And trying to get the right values here. I feel like the hair at the back here should be a little bit darker now. I'm able to see that because I put the background a little bit darker. And I'm able to read the values just a little bit better because of it. The nostril, the corner of the eye here. Could put the irises in there. Just play a bit with this. These occlusion shadows and the beard, which has a shadow here. So to not lose the volume of it all. And I'm not going to render it at all right now. I'm just going to push what I'm seeing. You could have just a little bit more of a light here, light there. And a brighter highlight on the nose. And I think that's already pretty good. Let me just put all of this together. Before, after, before, after. So you're really, really close. So hopefully this was useful to you. Thanks for sharing your work. And let's go to the next one. Here we have the work of Rick. Rick, thank you so much for sharing your work. Rick, you're one of these artists that I'm really happy to say that I prefer yours than the reference picture. I think you nailed the illustration. You added all these great texture, but what I'm seeing is, in terms of values, the values are not exactly the same as the reference. For the people on Instagram, here's the reference picture right there. You have more contrast on yours, which isn't a problem. So we don't have to go exactly there, but there is some rim lights that could help to make sure that we don't lose the shape of the face. I might come and add this. I think your hair, you had a very cool hair here. I don't think I'm gonna fix any of this. There's maybe a little bit more detail could be added to the hands, although the texture that you've been adding for the hands are super, super interesting. So let's see, what can I do with this? I think the most important part will be to just establish a little bit more, like the edges of your portrait needs to be just a little bit more tightened to not lose the form of the face, because that dotted texture that you added kind of make us lose the shape of the face. So I'm going to try to bring back the shape of the face with that rim light. You have that rim light in the neck that comes in the body. Like her jaw is actually like, maybe that neck should be just smaller. We'll do the same thing here on the other side. Now it's gonna give her a bigger jaw, but hey, I'm following the reference. Trying to not have too much contrast. Things like the nose, like I like to start my noses these days with like hard shapes. You can blend them later on, but if you start with hard shapes, it's going to help to make sure that you don't lose the shape of it all. Your eyes are looking a little bit higher than the reference. We can quickly fix that by just bringing them lower, so she's actually looking at us, and then adding those two highlights. That's fine. Adding just a little bit more here. So we're adding just a little bit of structure to the face, really, because you did such a great job to adding all these nice values already with all these textures. And my goal is not to fix that, because there's nothing to be fixed. I think it's looking great. I want to keep that, but I want to make sure that we are not losing the structure of the face by adding these hard edges where needed. Like the nose, lips, they're already pretty good, but the nose was a little bit like was a little bit too soft. It's kind of a shadow here that I established here. Then you have a lot of, I would call it chaos within your texture. I think it's not a huge problem. I love to do this myself, but if you're able to just add a few harder edges at some places to determine certain things, like I'm playing around the color here, because we're kind of losing track of what is what, because the texture is so prominent. And I'm just doing like small changes here, and I might go liquefy the jaw afterwards to replace it, but the values will be there to segregate some way, I don't know if it's the right word, to delimit, or to make the limitation of the face, or the edge of the face. Someone correct my English in the comments, please. And I think it's the same thing with the hand. I think the reference here, this one was kind of, all right, that's fine, but this one we can clearly see the fingers, and yes, we can see some of the fingers, and that's good, but I feel like you have like a lot of texture here. I think I'm going to try to bring back some of the highlight here. And it's really a play of you had the right value at the right places to kind of bring back edges. Like he did a pretty good job. I think it was just the first fingers that was so a bit maybe too scratchy compared to the reference. Like the values also are a little bit too dark, but I prefer your version. I think the contrast is very nice, but if you wanted to have like that, 1950s, 1960s, I'm not sure when the movie was done, look, where you have kind of like a grainy, grayscale texture, you would have to probably remove the contrast, but I think it's an aesthetic choice, so I don't have to do anything about it. So yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it for this. Maybe a little bit more, a little bit more details in the hair could have been added, but overall, I think that's pretty good. I want to say hi to Leiva. Welcome back. So what I'll do here is I'm going to take those. Wait, what is that? The reference? That's the. All right. Let me just copy that. Bring that here. Put them together, and I'm gonna go into liquify. And not necessarily to match the portrait to the reference, but to just move the portrait where I want it to be. So trying to give her like a little bit more of a feminine jaw. What do I mean by feminine jaw? Just something a little bit smaller. Something like that. Maybe elongating the neck a little. The shoulders on the reference were kind of squarish. We can play with that. And yeah, just small details, right? I think everything was pretty much there, but now that's it. So before, after. I already did like not a lot. It was I added 2%, but hopefully that 2% helped you. And thanks for sharing. That was the work of Rick BW from the DPA. I got 2 more DPA students, and then I'll have some more space for all of you guys that submitted the work. So here we have the work of Georgia. Georgia, thank you so much for sharing your work with me. This is looking great. Looking at the reference, and for those on Instagram, that's the reference. The reference has a little bit more contrast. Value range is a little bit larger. So there's that. Also, looking closely to this, that seems to be either an illustration or AI, I'm not sure. But anyhow, you have also all these other references that you've been using to create the snakes. I think that's great. Overall, it's missing just a little bit of the dark that's needed. So we'll try to fix that, and I'm going to try to add a little bit more structure to the face. Now the reference is very round, like very round lighting. This is like a studio lighting with a soft box, you can imagine. So there's no hard edges at any places, but as an artist, adding a little bit of a better hard edges or playing with the structure of the face will add some oomph to the illustration. Alejandrova, fascination how such small stuff can have a huge effect. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Sometimes we work on an illustration and we're not happy with it and we feel deflated. But you know, like I always picture myself like that little illustration where you have someone digging for treasure and there's someone keep going in and the other one that's coming back giving up basically, and he's like, it was right there. He had just to dig one more time. Sometimes your illustration is that you just have to do a little bit more, and it's going to change the entire thing. All right, so for this one, I would like to, I'll bring that up and make a copy. I'm going to just play with the levels and add a bit more contrast, just so I can get the blacks that I want. Right. I think that's a little bit better. Just a bit more contrast. But I still feel like the eyes would need a touch of darker. Like the eyelashes for sure are darker. I'll say this. This is a very slick style of rendering. I'm a lot more texture these days, so I'm going to try to keep it as slick as possible, but let's fix a little bit. Like I was saying, like the face could have maybe a little bit more of a jaw that could help. So just a little bit. Smooth shroom bit. I like that little guy hissing, so cute. Yeah, I think the head of the snake here add definitely a lot to the illustration. I think it was a nice touch. I don't want to add too much contrast here. That's too much, but just a little bit more. Trying to keep the smooth effect of it all. I'm going to use the smudge tool to kind of blend all of this. Whoops. See. How can I? That's fine. Trying to. Yeah, I think that's already, the contrasts are already a little bit better. Let me just grab these two together into a group. So that's already there. A little bit better. When it comes to the snakes, they are feeling a little flat right now. What we have to decide is a little bit more of a light direction. So let's decide of a light direction. Let me put this in there. So my thinking is, if I'm looking at the portrait right now and how the way it's kind of a soft box light that comes from top to bottom into kind of a little bit that fashion a little bit. Maybe it's a little bit more front, but more or less. So let's think about how we can just add more form to those. We want to, first of all, I'm going to think about, like, if it's at the back, probably the back would be just a little bit darker. So I'm going to kind of pass on a soft round brush a little bit. So it feels like what's at the back is just getting a little bit darker. Not too much though. I'm going to remove a little bit of it, but just a little bit. It feels like, all right, so it's not in front view. And I think the easiest way to establish lighting on these would be to give them some highlights to certain places. I'm going to use a color dodge for that, so I can paint over what's already there. And let's try to think about where would be the highlights. If you're looking at the reference picture, where the highlight is in the eyes, for example, will give you a great indication usually of where it is. If it's in a studio made by a photographer, my gut feeling is this is AI. I'm not sure how AI is able to determine like where is the lighting and keep it all exactly the same. on an illustration, but let's just go with it. So there's some highlight right about here on this reference picture. So we can think about, all right, so it would be about the same spot. So let's see if I can just kind of add a few highlights at a few places. Now these are much harder than they need to be. I'll come back and remove remove some of the effect in a second. I just want to keep it hard so I can kind of visualize a little bit at a glance how it would look. And then I'm going to come in, take my soft round brush as an eraser, and I'm just going to delete kind of most of it, really. And as I'm doing this, my realization is to keep the rendering going. Two things I need to do. I need to also add some shadows, but also take in consideration the texture of the snake, right? So right now I kind of added a highlight on, like it would be like a tube that is rolled up, right? Just one spot kind of thing. But you have all these little different scales, right? And these scales would have some texture and some shadows and all of that. So we can come back here. I'll use a normal layer for this and kind of think about, all right, so there's probably certain edges that would maybe catch the light a little bit more. So I could just kind of like do that. And Georgia already did that, but I'm going to try to do it in a way that it's even clearer, where I put the highlight itself, just so we have something a little bit more bright. Basically, you want to add some focal points. And as it turns away, you want to think about how these tubes turns away, and the scales will basically get that. Now, the idea is not to be perfect. What I tell my students all the time is try to aim for believability, not perfection. So that's what I'm trying to do here. So I'm just adding a little bit. You don't have to add it everywhere. If you add it just a little bit at some places, your brain, or any brain that look at this, any person with a pair of eyes basically, is going to imagine that there's details everywhere. There's like that magic trick for some reason that your brain does. It's looking at something in front of you, it's a little bit of details, and it's imagining all the details going everywhere. So you don't have to overdo it. Matter of fact, if you overdo it, especially on a portrait, it's going to look not so good. So I'm just kind of zooming in, zooming out. I think that's pretty good so far. And then what I'll do is I'm going to try to kind of add some more shadows. So the shadows in between all of these, I'm gonna place them like there's a little bit of a harder light. So like we have hard cast shadows. Now I was sharing that somewhere. No, it's something I'm going to share later on Instagram. But cast shadows always, or most of the time, have hard edges. It depends on the light, really. But as a rule of thumb, you can just kind of like have a really good way to do shadows if you keep to the cast shadow being hard edges and the form shadow being soft edges. What's the difference? A cast shadow is casted, and a form shadow is directly on the subject. So for example, on the portrait, this is a form shadow going from this plane to this plane. As it's turning away like this is a form shadow. It will be softer. This is also a form shadow right here. It's on the nose, it's softer, it turns away. but here we have a cast shadow. This is casted by the light going on the face, and then it stops here, and then this is like the shadow that's casted away. Hopefully this is making sense. So what I'm going to do here, like I was saying, is I'm going to kind of try to think about like, all right, some of those shapes, those forms are kind of casted, which should help us with creating a little bit more volume. And I'll make sure to have like occlusion shadows that are deep enough, especially the ones that are going at the back, because at the back it should be it should get darker, right? So let's try to do this. I think you already did it a few places, which is good. Alright, so some of these, some of that. So here we can add some smaller maybe cast shadows. And that should add a little bit more volume, a little bit more contrast, and also bring back the value range needed for this illustration. I'm gonna add maybe like a tiny cast shadow here and occlusion shadow in between those two, and maybe there's a cast shadow here, and maybe there's a cast shadow there. It separates the elements basically. Like here we could add, that's too much, but I think for the snake it's pretty good. And this. I could paint the inside of the snake mouth to be just a little bit darker, creating a little bit more focal point this way. Focal point here. Let's see that. Here, I see what you did here. The reference had like these two lines in there, but these are kind of, they're always hard to do because you have to be like very kind of like it needs to go from dark to pale. Like I would be prone to like completely eliminate them. I'm still going to see if I'm able to just make them just a little bit better. But ultimately, I don't think they add a lot to the illustration. Let's see if what happens if we're just removing them. They're adding a little bit, maybe. Let's put that in transparency, maybe. Just a little bit. Alright. So, before and after. Let's put all of that together. We started here, and now we're here. Here to here. Now, looking at this, I think there's a bit of like stylization in there that I prefer to do. So all the tips that I showed you definitely will help, but the result at the end is a lot more contrasty. Now that's a preference to me. One is not better than the other. Just wanted to precise that. But my version here has a little bit more roundness. It's a little bit more rounded. You see a little bit more depth. So even if you were to keep your style being a little bit more on the desaturated side of things, I would still try to bring some of it. So adding a little bit more contrast. For example, I could take all my corrections here and put the layer in, I don't know, like 30%, which would add just a little bit more contrast while keeping this soft, smooth style of like having not all the value range, basically missing the blacks and whites. But yeah, just wanted to precise that. For the rest, thank you so much for sharing. Georgia, great portrait. Looking forward for the coloring that you'll be able to do on this one for next week when we start the next homework. Let me catch up with the chat real quick. Steampunk Planner, sorry, had treatment today. I can't stay up longer. Oh, I'm so sorry, but all right, good night. Thanks for coming. Next, Sunny. Love what you did here. We had a lot of portraits so far, but these are absolutely super cool. Very Halloween theme as well, which makes me happy. I love the spider web that you created. It feels like you added like a little bit of like motion blur in it, which is amazing. And I would have to zoom in for people to see, but like this seems to be a little bit motion blurred. It's absolutely beautiful. Love the texture of it all. I don't have much comments beside a lot of praises for it, but I saw this one and I thought this could have a little bit more contrast. You want to think about like maybe we could have like a light that comes from the top. Like you have like a very bright light that come from the top on this guy. And I think I can probably manage to do it with just a level adjustment layer by making sure that I'm adding a little bit more light, a little bit more contrast. So I'm going to add all this light here, and I'll see if I can come back on that layer to make sure that we have just the contrast that you already had, basically. So right now we have the light, and I want to keep the dark shadow on the ground. I want to feel like there's a separation between the darkest dark, meaning the shadows, and the highlights. And I've been using a lot of level, and my memory tells me that levels are not in Procreate. So for Procreate user, I'm sorry. We were having a debate on one of the posts that I did on Instagram this week about my preference to use Photoshop, because it's just that much more powerful. You're able to do things that you cannot do with Procreate, or have a harder time to do with Procreate. This is one of the things. But yeah, not much more to say about this one, Sony. I think it's looking absolutely great. I would have to make sure that my adjustment layer only focuses on this guy though. Whoops. Let's not mess around with the other ones, because I feel like the other ones are pretty good as is. Went to the party. Thanks for the critique. You're welcome, Rick. Rick, did you see? I think I just critiqued you like a minute ago. Love the illustration that you did. I guess you'll have to watch the replay. So thanks for sharing, Sunny. Next, this is the work of Alexandrona Art. This is super cool. Love the monster that you've chosen. I never played. I'm assuming this is a game. I never played it, but it looks terrifying. This is a place where the value range are not exactly what they need to be. So you have the reference on top and the illustration at the bottom, and you can tell that the illustration is a lot more pale. So what I want to point out, I want to point out something here. So when you're looking at the reference picture here, and I'm going to put an adjustment layer called what is it called? I think it's called threshold. Yes. And I'm going to play with this until I have a clear understanding of like, basically what it does is it transforms the illustration into a black and white only. And I want to point out that because this is like, this is going to help. You know, I'm gonna do it as a separate layer. It's gonna be even better. I'm gonna put it only on the reference and still play with it until I have like a pure black and white visualization. That's hard for me to say. Of the illustration, and I'm going to put this a little bit in transparency so we get all the different other like values in there. This is what needs to be done for you to understand kind of like this scene where you have a kind of a spotlight on the monster. The illustration that you did, we are losing that effect of spotlight. What we're having is more like a bright scene that it's lit. It could be broad day. It could be like midday on this illustration, where the reference is clearly like it's a spotlight, right? So let's try to modify your illustration to kind of fit that. The first thing I'll do once again is to play with the levels. I'm gonna try to make everything kind of darker, but more than darker, I think I'm gonna have to add some dark multiply layer on the background. Whoopsie. So there and there. And then bring back the silhouette of this guy. Gonna make a selection real quick. If I were to do this, I would probably take a lot more time than what I'll do here, but I'm gonna do like the quick and dirty way to kind of bring back the light scheme by, I'm gonna use I think an overlay layer, pure white maybe, and kind of add some, but also add a just normal layer with some gray. And you kind of have like a little bit of a bounce light on the other side, but not too much. And then in the middle of that thing, you also have like some just darker values. So you don't want to lose the what could be called occlusion shadows, I guess, for this illustration. So just adding some of that to have the contrast of it all. And then probably what I would do is I want to add more like there's some, like you already did it, like there's some highlights that are more prominent at some places. Let's make sure that these pop a little bit more. And then there's, yeah, occlusion shadows here and there. Oops. So there's that. And I think, let me get back that selection again. I feel like the background could be slightly darker, especially after the door. Like where the guy is. But not so much on the door, because you want the door to still pop. Same thing kind of here. All right, let's see what we got. Let's put all of this together. And before, after, before, after. And what I want to do now is I want to see if it's matching this. I'm going to put the threshold here. And you can tell that they're not perfect, but yeah, it's kind of making sure that we have a spotlight on this guy. Now, if you want to push that even more and push the storytelling even more, you could just add like let's say a layer of color dodge or overlay and try to just add more light to it. Whoops. A little bit more light to it. And that's the normal one. Let's go for a color dodge. Yeah, just a little bit more light. And push the values even more than the reference picture to just create even more like a spotlight on this guy. And there's some of the contrast, again, that I'm looking at the background. Because you've been adding a lot of texture. And the texture is not helping because it creates contrast, which ultimately brings your eyes towards it. And the showstopper, the star of this illustration, should be the monster. So removing some of that texture will ultimately help to calm down whatever we're looking at, you know, and bring back our attention towards our main character, our monster in this case. So kind of removing some of that noise will also help. Let's put all of that together. What's not working here? Wait. And before and after. Before, after. So hopefully that was useful. And thanks for sharing. Next one, we have an amazing portrait from Jab17 Jabs. First of all, let me tell you that you did an amazing job here. I really like your illustration, which is the one on the right. Lots of great details, but I think we can see from the get-go that the lighting, or the light and shadow, which is super important on this portrait in particular, doesn't have the contrast needed. This contrast really helped to understand the form, but also just the drama of this portrait. I think it's an easy fix. I think I'll be able to do it with just an adjustment layer, a level, for example. But you know what? For the people on Procreate, let me help you and just create maybe something with a curve, because curves are always everywhere. And if I put a dot at the top and a dot at the bottom, for the people on Instagram, I'm talking about this right here. Dot at the top, dot at the bottom. I believe that I'll be able to add some of the contrast. Maybe not enough though. I might have to do it manually. Adding another dot here definitely helps. So let's start with this. That already helps. And then I'll add another layer, probably an overlay, probably with white. And yeah, just soft round brush, brushing away on the entire thing. What the overlay does is it's going to keep some of the black ones even if I paint with white. So let me bring that back to the side. And now we have a before and after. Before, after, before, after. So yeah, really all the work was already done. All I had to do is kind of adjust it. So really, really good job. And thanks for sharing. Super cool one here. Owl taxidermy. Owl taxidermy. So, love this. What you have here though is it feels flat. There's no value to it to show the form. Let's put the reference in black and white. Again, I'm going to do the quick and dirty way to do it. I'm just going to first add some shadows. I'm going to use a multiply layer for that. Let's change the music. Getting fed up with jazz for now. Let's get to the more laid back. I need to create another playlist for the next time I go live because I got only 2 and I keep switching from the 2 of them. All right. So, very, very important. I wanted to talk about that today. If you're painting something from a reference picture, even if you're painting like from imagination, starting with the background and the values that are needed for your scene is super important because all your values will work in comparison to that basic value range. So, with that being said, I'm going to make sure that we start with something very, very dark here, because the reference has basically a dark background. It's practically black, right? So let's start with that. I'll do the same thing here. So now that that's done, I'm going to use a soft round brush and kind of like, there's a few values that needs to be rounded up. She's got some shadows. I'm using a soft round brush because right now I don't want to go into details. I just want to soften some of those shadows that needs to be darker. Like this needs to be darker. I'll go in a second and add more details to it afterwards. Let's have a zoom on her face, and we'll try to we'll try to render the face. Let me put that here for the people on Instagram. So before you add eyes and eyelashes and whatnot, especially for like a black and white grayscale study, you want to just kind of paint values. So all of this here, what am I painting on? Right? New layer. Let's put that on top. So normal layer, yes. So I'm just going to paint values in here. If I see it gray, I paint it gray. If I see it pale, I paint it pale. And so on and so forth. And what I'll do is I'm going to use also a smudge tool to I'm going to use a smudge tool to, let's put that here, to blend these lines. And this is going to help to convey form as well. You have some pretty dark occlusion shadows here, like this. The hair is definitely like darker. There's that part here that's a bit less dark. You had some bright highlights here. We have some occlusion shadows that are darker. Just trying to add some of that here. I'm going to use the smudge tool here now to blend some of those lines. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to start showing the form. Like an occlusion shadow right there. Something like that. So that's how you want to think about it. You want to think about it as being values that you move around instead of lines. There's a little bit of light catch under the eyelid. There is a spot of light right there, just surrounded by some darker values. And sometimes you're going to have occlusion shadows that looks like lines, but they are not lines. And I'm not going to render again the entire thing here, but just trying to convey some more form. I'm merging all of this with the smudge tool now, and then repainting the values. Here you got like a very big like occlusion shadow surrounded by two pieces of light and the hair here. And just all of this here is darker, chin is darker, here that's darker, so on and so forth. And just slowly we're rendering the face. And I'm not going to do the entire body, it would take too much time. But I want to say that to everybody that has a hard time, you know, going from line to rendering is very difficult. Having an exercise where you disregard any sorts of lines will definitely help you. And what you want to focus on instead is shapes that are conveyed by the values and the lighting of your reference, essentially. Because a good rendering is really the ability to see the tiny change in value. Now I'm having a very pixelized image to start with, and I'm just focusing on the portrait, so that's not ideal. Because you have some very small change of value and planes on this reference that will make or break the illustration. So that's what I have to say about this. Hopefully this was useful. Thanks for sharing. Next, we have the work of Cadmus. Cadmus, this is great, except that we said that we were supposed to do in black and white, so I'm going to do this. I'm also going to put your reference into Grayscale, and that's the reference for those of you on Instagram. The thing that I'm seeing the most is it's missing the right lights. And again, if I were to put a threshold on the reference, you could see like what are the zones of light that need to be done on the reference from the illustration. And I think we can just kind of simplify the zones. So I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to go ahead. I like that you changed the expression. That's very cool, but I feel like And you kind of change the hair a little bit too, which is good. Now I'm thinking about it, maybe you change the entire lighting, but lighting kind of seems like the same, so I'm just going to assume that it's supposed to be the same. And I'm going to use, you know, I might actually make a selection like this and then use a level and see if I can just kind of bring the right values. I think that's already closer a little bit. I'll merge that. Whoops. I'll merge these two together. A trick to also make things like look more 3D is to get rid of lines. Especially if you're like in the light zone, you have all these light, and taking out some of the details in the light zone. Essentially, depending on how the photography is lit, you can tell in the reference here that you have all these like little dots in the rock, for example, and then in the light you have all this zone of white where you don't see anything, and that's because the picture itself is I don't know what's the right term, it's overlaid basically, and so you lose some of the details in the light zone. And this will help to give you a sense of realism a little bit more by taking out some of these details. And most definitely the line that is facing the light can be removed. You can keep the one that's in the shadow just because it helps with both occlusion shadows and just making the delimitation of the snakes. But in the light, we could just take them out completely. Something like that already helps to just make it feel like it's working more. I'm going to use the smudge tool to round up. Like I was saying earlier, a round edge or a soft edge is for the form shadow and a harder edge is for cast shadow. On the reference that we have here, the lighting comes from above, so you have like this zone here, technically I think is like a cast shadow, so this would be like a hard edge, but then turns it here and becomes a soft shadow. So there's that. Probably get a shadow here, another shadow there, a little bit more. Can simplify this a little bit more. The nose, for example, I would have it all white, but then I would kind of play with the contrast on the other side of the nose to bring back some contrast, right? So it feels like it's in the light. Trying to take this out. And so on and so forth. I'm not going to render it all, but that's the idea behind it. Yeah, for the rest, beside these few places where, like I was saying, it's needed to just have higher contrast in the light, probably some core shadow probably here. Core shadow is the shadow between the light, between light and shadow. It's kind of stuck between a key light and a bounce light. Here the bounce light comes from the ground. And then you would have some more light here. Softer edge there. Softer edge there. I'm trying to get rid of those lines would help, would create more believability. Same thing here. I would go a lot paler in the highlights, trying to establish that play of light by really pushing those values as much as possible. Here, kind of have like the knee would be darker. Again, I won't do much more than this, but just wanted to show these are super important because it tells the story basically. They add the contrast to it all. So thanks for sharing, Cadmus. Thanks for sharing. Looking forward to see it in color next week. All right, I'm gonna try to push and do a few more before I leave you guys. This is the work of PD Gloria. Gloria, I put you there really just to tell you how good of a job you did. This is gonna be an easy fix. There's a little bit of value range. You can tell from the reference. The illustration is on the right side, the reference is on the left side, that if I just put a adjustment layer of levels, I'll be able to kind of push the values to get a little bit more, and I might on the mask of my level, I might take out what's everything but the face, because I feel like the contrast of the rest of the illustration, for the most part, was good. It was just the face. Some of the other article, I guess, that kind of needed some, like a push. I might just maybe push the band on the hat too. So before, after. I love playing digitally. But yeah, just such a great portrait, and thanks for sharing. I'll come back to this one. I'm gonna give because I got another one like this that was just like this one. Ackerman 95. Just amazing work. I think the illustration is just so well done. I got no feedback except congratulations. This is absolutely gorgeous. Great amount of details. The values are well done. Yeah, just really, really well done. There's a few differences that are not even worth mentioning, I feel. Like the nose, the shape of the shadow here could be pushed a little bit more. Tiny detail. I'm really having a hard time finding anything else. Just amazing. Amazing work. Thanks for sharing. Okay, let's go back here. I love the work of, this is from Ji Young. I love that you went for creating your own character, which is right here. I think you even named it Blair, if I understand. That's super cool. So here there's a major problem. You created a brand new character and you decided to have it on white. And the white is not helping you understand the forms of this illustration. Where is it? It's right there. So I'm going to, how am I going to do this? I might just, let me make a copy of this. I will change the value range and something like that. And I'm going to come back and kind of add the light. So you have the light that is coming from the right. Let me go and, whoops, that's not what I want to do. color dodge and see if I'm able to just bring some of the light. Yeah, there we go. So because now I have a darker background, I'm going to be able to read the light with more ease. It feels like there's light coming from this side. Matter of fact, whoops. If I flip this and put it to multiply, and I could even push even more the contrast a little bit to help me with this. Where was I? And then from there, now you want to play with the values. I'll put the eye afterwards. It's very important when you do work from imagination with lighting to just take your time, because every single places where you add some light will help you describe the form of that object. Now, if I understand from your reference picture, I feel like you use this pumpkin as a reference for the head. So that's kind of the idea that I'm having while I'm doing this. And I just want to make sure that I'm rendering so we understand the form. Now you have the hand in the middle of all of this. I'll try to work on that afterwards. But let's just try to, whoops. Let's try to convey form on the face to start with. I feel like this is supposed to be the nose, probably. Something like that, and we could add still a little bit contrast here for the nose. And I'm going to take all of this, put it in that folder. Whoops. What do I do? Okay. So before, after, before, after. So we're already having some form that's coming back. You added those stripes. I don't know if they were stripes or supposed to be like a pumpkin texture. By the way, if you want to participate in the pumpkin carving challenge, I'm going to go into greater details on this. Also, for everybody that needs more help, Digital Paint Academy has a lot of my classes in there that could help you. Where I go in more details into light theory and all of that good stuff. Here the light would be actually the opposite way, so I might just kind of push that, go fetch some white, and try to think about where's the light hitting our object, kind of thing. And you would have like the white here. And then I'm going to try to create some contrast in between those two volume by adding a value here that's different. The mouth is important here. We have like an edge where we want to make sure that all of this should be like much darker to convey like it's in the eye here could feel like it's just darker. Now we have a tangent line here between the finger and the face. I'm going to try to remove that tangent by giving a little bit more space to the finger here. And I'm certainly not going to render the entire thing, but I'm hoping that already I'm giving you just a place to where to start things to render. Another thing that's important is if you have different articles, different parts of the illustration, like this seems to be the stem, probably that has a local color that's different. When you're doing in Grayscale, you need to just kind of establish that local color by having a different value range within that object. So that's what I'm doing here by having something darker. So I'm hoping that this is already helpful, because I don't think I'll be able to finish it. But if you have more, if you work on this one in the community, please keep posting it, and I'll try to give you specific feedback. If you tag my name, you can tag my name in all the time in the community. There's some community people don't allow that, but so far I had no problem doing it. So feel free to use the tagging system to tag my name to make sure that I see your illustration, and I'll come back to help you with it. But I'll move on to another one. And thanks for sharing. Next, where am I? Next, we have the work of Wayne. Wayne, this is great. I love that you use a reference picture and try to really create something completely different with it. That's super cool. The problem is the lighting that you decided to have. So you have a scene which the lighting is not clear, and you have a character which the lighting is completely different, and then you kind of try to mix the both of them kind of thing, and it's not working. I'm going to show you why. So we have this character here that has from what I understand, he has a lighting that comes from the top, and you can tell by the crotch. The cast shadow is right there, you know, but also the neck, the cast shadow seems to be right there. So we can establish that the light direction is probably coming in his face from the top, like this. That's the light direction. If you're looking at the illustration that you have here, the light direction is coming from a total different direction, this side. And we can tell because you have your cast shadow right here. Shroom you're absolutely welcome. Thanks for the love. So this is the cast shadow right there. So we need to figure out a way to merge those two. My thinking is, what am I thinking? I'm trying to think which of the lighting would make more sense. And I think I would keep the lighting of the reference and try to merge everything else. Because it's going to be easier for you. You have already the character, you can just match this lighting. But then you have to match the lighting of whatever else you decide to do with. And I feel like this is not so far, but it needs to be moved probably a little bit. So you have this here, and it would be probably going more like this. And I'm going to create just a bit of a bounce light here to separate the shadow from the cast shadow from the form shadow. Then maybe you would have this coming down on top of it. The lighting here would face here. That would be like more rounded towards this direction. Something like that. You want to think about this as a tube. Where is the highlight? Where the highlight will face the light direction, and the light direction comes from the top of it. Also, you can think about like when you're doing like tubes, snakes, whatever it is that is like kind of smooth, if you break it down into like sections, you'll be able to add more volume. Like, let's say like this and this is a new section. Well, maybe that whole thing here is therefore just a little bit more dark because it's turning in some way away from the light direction. And then you have this whole one that, whoops, is facing the light direction, right? And so you can create like kind of sections like this, where this is facing the light direction. So let's kind of push that. And then let's say that this is turning away a little bit from the light direction. And it helps to read, yeah, the different planes basically. Like another example could be here. Maybe this is facing the light direction a little bit more, and then this is like going away, and then maybe this is facing the light direction a little bit more. And so it feels like we're designing just the different planes. Maybe this is facing the light direction a little bit more. Sorry. And then probably that this is facing the light direction a little bit more. And now we're starting to feel like, sorry, I'm Instagram. I was doing right here. It starts to feel like we're having these like different planes, you know. This could get darker. Maybe this is slightly darker as it's turning away from the lights. And then you can use something like a mixer brush tool to kind of merge these edges together. But keeping them like very hard at the beginning will help you to understand the volume of it all. But let's go back to what I was trying to do here. So you want to think about just that light direction here. Like it's too lit here. Technically that whole body, you know, is lit here, and you have the cast shadow of, I guess in this case is the cast shadow of the leaf. So maybe it's just slightly less big. And whoopsie, where am I? Let me use maybe an overlay so I can keep the values that are already there. Kind of push the value a little bit more, but I think it's not going to be enough. I'm going to, whoops. Okay. I'm going to have to still push some of the value here. I have the shoulder here that's kind of rounded here that you can all keep, and then you have like the body goes into the shadow after the chest. You know, the contrast between these two needs to be different. So it feels like this is facing the light first. Now this light on this leaf could cast a hard shadow. And wherever you can put like a hard shadow to establish kind of like form. So I'm thinking like, all right, so this is like casting a shadow on this leaf right here. And I'm going to try to maybe make it like on the other side, the leaf. So it feels like it's more 3D. Something like that. Because they have the same light, right? This leaf and the other leaves, they're facing the same way. So they should have the same kind of amount of light. The pumpkin, the top of the pumpkin is facing the light. So that needs to just use a normal one and come back and delete that for now. Whoops. Right, and then all of this gets darker. This, I know you have some light on the leg, but for the purpose of this illustration, you could like keep all of this with just less detail to simplify the objects that you have. You want to bring the attention to like other places, I guess, and you have a lot of details happening in there. Why did I put this? Whoops. Did I? Scheiße. Sorry, put the arrow on the original. But let me put all of this together. And slowly we're moving the light. Slowly. Let's see if we can add some more. You see that cord that you have on the body here, that cast shadow is super important to indicate the direction of the light. So let's do this. This seems to go on top of it, that's fine. And it turns into the light. This shadow, I feel like all of this maybe should actually be darker. And you can keep these values grouped into just a darker range. So what you want is you want to establish like the top of the body as being like the thing that gets the most light. And if you're looking at the reference picture actually that you have, like if I were to again put a threshold on it, you'll see that the chest has a lot more of the white, the chest and the face, than the legs. So that's what we're trying to kind of establish with this illustration. Having the chest getting more of the light. And then we could play with the silhouette. Where am I? The silhouette of the shadow here to kind of separate the light. And the top of the image here could just be darker because it's in the background. You don't want to attract too much the eyes of the viewers there. There's too much contrast there. You want to keep them where the action is, where your character is, kind of thing. What is happening? All right, so that was a lot of tips. And obviously I'm not going to render the entire thing. It would take a lot of time, which is another of my, I want to give you a before and after here. Let's move that away. Let's put that like this, and that, and boom. Before and after. So slowly I've been moving just a few things. And that's where lighting is super important. Like if I were to restart this illustration, if I were you, I would, before starting to render anything, kind of think about what is the light direction. And then for each single part, ask myself, based on the light direction that I've decided, which is not this one, but this one, or more like this one. Like every single article is like, all right, does it cast a shadow? Where does it cast a shadow? And trying to build it up. Now, there's a bit of perspective to understand when you're doing lighting from imagination. And if you have difficulties with this, I created an entire class in the DPA for you. So absolutely go check it out. Next and last, Celia. Celia, this is super looking good. I love, it looks like, for me, it looks like Scooby-Doo. I don't know why. There's a Scooby-Doo vibe to it, and I absolutely love it. Sorry for Instagram people, it's right there. It's missing form, but I love the style and everything. So I thought maybe I could try to add form to it by establishing a light direction, which we could decide to have it like frontal like this. Just whoops, moving this like this. So that's going to be my light. So I'm going to just kind of like make a quick selection of the entire head. Something like that. And use a soft round brush and just use a multiply layer to black to round up just the head a little bit. You know what? I don't think I need the selection. Let's start out again. I'll just make sure that it's on this. So you can imagine that goes there. And I'm going to just try to, imagine that all of this has some roundness to it. Kind of mixing like a skull with a mummy. It's not going to be perfect, but it's already going to read a little bit more 3D. And truthfully, that's going to just help. Like a little cast shadow there, for example. The teeth like this, but also could establish just kind of a cast shadow from the mouth to give it like depth. Could do the same thing down there. Some shadow here. We can round up all of this a little bit. Whoops. Round it up. And then add more like an occlusion, not actually a cast shadow for the neck, which will also help to add light. This seems to be like the nose. I'm just going to put that all into like this. And I'm not going to go into details because I could start like rendering the edges of, you know, what's in the light here and whatnot. But we don't have to do this. Oops, why it's not working? What did I have here? I say I'm not going to do it and then I end up doing it, but I'm not going to do it at all. But that's the idea. I would start adding like edges and details. But for me, that was what was missing to this, because the design is super cool. But being able to add light from imagination and kind of render the light on it all could make this zombie mummy just feel a little bit more 3D. And that's it. That was the last one for today. Thank you so much for everybody that participated, guys. So in next week on Monday, I'll announce the other one, but I can already tell you guys it's going to be to put colors to your rendering. So if you participated, try to render as much as you can, work the details of what you want, and then next week you'll have to add colors to it. And on Wednesday in 2 weeks, I'll be going live to give you tips about coloring. So I'll give you all the details in the tribe. Probably I would like for you to post your grayscale image and the color to see the transformation that you have, and I'll try to give you tips about this. Also, next week we're still having the Daily 5 where I come live and I just do the prompt of the day. If you want to participate in the challenge, free challenge to participate, you'll have all the details on the registration page, which you'll find a link in the description. And I think next week we are doing Spider Queen, so looking forward to do it. So yeah, hopefully I'll see you there. For the rest, have a great day, night, depending where you are in the world, and I'll see you next week, guys. Have a good one.